Welcome back. New destruction and devastation in the Middle East as fighting picks up. The attacks come after weeks of peace between Israel and Hamas, but the ceasefire agreement has since expired without a replacement. Israel also launching dozens of new airstrikes into Lebanon, which they call retaliation for a deadly strike in northern Israel. Now, the Middle East was taking meaningful steps towards a lasting peace, now replaced by, again, that death and destruction. The relationship between Israel and the United States is once again in the spotlight. The recent violence sparking new protests across the nation, including right here in Metro Atlanta. Well, tonight, speaking exclusively with the Consul General of Israel to the Southeastern United States is Eric Mock. Eric, I know there are a lot of questions to get to there.
You're absolutely right, Eric, and that's why we're here now, joined live by Anat Sultan-Dadon, the Consul General of Israel to the Southeastern United States, which is headquartered right here in Atlanta. Consul General, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, we want to talk about these protests. We've seen just this week, once the ceasefire was broken, protesters gathering outside the Consul General where you work and condemning Israel's move in breaking the ceasefire. How are you responding to those protests here in Atlanta?
I think that unfortunately what we've seen since October 8th, actually, in these protests is condemnation of Israel and a praise for terror. These protesters are not really about the Palestinians or concern for the Palestinian people. What they did a few days ago outside our consulate in Atlanta is call for intifada, deadly terror attacks, praise the so-called resistance fighters, praise Hamas terrorists. Nothing about praising and glorifying terror and supporting Hamas will do anything for a better future for the Palestinian people. And unfortunately, I believe that this is a part of what has brought us to day 533 of this war. We should not be here. We should not be in day 533. But so much criticism has been directed at Israel rather than being directed at the terror organization who could today still lay down their weapons, release the hostages. The war would be over today.
So you're saying that Hamas could have avoided this most recent attack by Israel?
By all means. U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff placed two proposals on the table. Both of them were accepted by Israel, rejected by Hamas.
Now, it's not just protests here, though. You have protesters even in Israel who are saying this move by your government is endangering hostages' lives and could put them at risk. How does resuming the fighting actually help the hostages?
Unfortunately, we are in an impossible situation, one that we did not choose, but we are forced to deal with a terror organization. And that terror organization, unfortunately, has rejected proposals to prolong the ceasefire. What it has done during the time that it was supposed to negotiate, it has used the ceasefire in order to rearm, regroup, and again prepare for attacking Israel. It is not releasing hostages. It is still committed to attacking Israel. We can't have both. We need to see our hostages home, and we need to see that Hamas is no longer able to carry out attacks against Israel.
Do you think that could have been done, though, without resuming the bombing? Because the ceasefire was holding.
The ceasefire was in place, and yet Hamas was not negotiating. It was not releasing hostages. What is then the purpose of the ceasefire? What incentive do they have if no one is calling on them, demanding them to release the hostages and lay down their weapons, if they have a ceasefire which allows for them to continue stealing aid, to continue preparing their attacks, to continue moving into areas that they had vacated, setting up operation again? We are only prolonging a situation which is not only intolerable for Israel, it is intolerable for the Palestinians as well.
What is your message to Georgians who are on both sides of this conflict, who were so relieved and happy to see a stop to the violence and are now feeling those feelings all over again, seeing the death and the destruction resuming? What is your message to them?
War is horrible. It is a horrible reality. There is immense suffering for all who are involved in this war. It is not a war that we have chosen. We would like to see a future of peace and coexistence in our region, but we also have the responsibility to face reality. And we are fighting terrorists whose declared agenda is the destruction of Israel and the Jewish people. No sovereign nation would allow for such a terror group to live on its borders. And we cannot allow for another October 7th that they clearly state they will commit again and again. We can't allow for that to happen. I would urge anyone who truly wants to see a future of peace to call on this organization, on these terrorists, to finally lay down their weapons, release the hostages, and ensure not only a better and more secure future for Israel, but a better future also for the Palestinian people. They deserve leadership that is committed to finally building a future for their people, rather than a leadership committed to the destruction of Israel.
Anat Sultan-Dadon, thank you so much for joining us and taking these questions. And coming up later tonight, we will be speaking with some Palestinian activists about how they view this resumption of the war as well. But for now, Eric, we're going to send it back over to you.
All right, Eric Mock, thanks so much.